Back to Mrs. O'Graham's Maths. This video is the next one in our series where we're doing walkthrough solutions for the D&D resource booklets. So first of all, a big thank you to D&D Resources for allowing me to share their materials in this way so that I can do these walkthrough tutorials for you. There is a link in the video description to their website. If you have not already bought or got hold of a copy of these papers in physical form, I strongly recommend that you actually go and order those. It's much more useful exam practice to work through these on paper like you would for the actual exam before coming here for these tutorials. Okay, let's take a look at the first question, and with each of these there's always something to read for statistically based reports. That's the standard that we're doing on this video, and this is the practice example assessment number 3 from this booklet. I'm going to assume you have read the article and go straight onto the questions. So starting with the target population of this survey, about where is it? About halfway down that article, it tells us that the researchers were doing this survey from 15,425 public and private high school students. So it's all public and private high school students in the USA. Part B, we are working out a confidence interval. Now, the value that was reported in the survey was 16.2%. The margin of error we are working out as being plus or minus 1 over root n, so that's 1 over the square root of 15,425. That's how many we were told took the survey. So 1 divided by the square root of 15425, and then we times it by 100 for a percentage. So plus or minus 0.81%. So confidence interval is then 16.2 minus that. So 15.4. And then 16.2 plus 0.81, 17.0%. We're also asked to interpret the confidence interval. So this tells us that we can expect the real value to be between these two numbers. So we write that out as being that we can be confident that between 15.4% and 17% of high school students, so that's our target population there in the USA, were electronically bullied in the last 12 months. Question C, we need to explain cluster sampling. So cluster sampling is where you get a group that already exists within the population that you're trying to identify, and you use them as a sample group. So for this, it would be schools. You can easily approach a school and say, could your whole school please do this survey? Two-stage cluster sampling would then be, we find clusters within those schools. So it could be a year group or certain classes that are asked to complete this survey. There's my write-up of that one. Then we need to identify one advantage and one disadvantage of cluster sampling. So the obvious advantage is that it's very easy to do it in this way. You just ask a school to participate, their groups are already set up, and away you go. You can administer this very easily. Disadvantages is that we might not end up with a sample that's truly representative of our population. There's my write-up of that one. Okay, for part D, the question that was asked on cyberbullying looked like this. During the past 12 months, have you ever been electronically bullied? Count being bullied through email, chat rooms, instant messaging, websites, or text, and then you had to tick yes or no. Comment on the framing of the question and whether it will secure the required information from the respondents, and then comment on possible improvements that you could make to this question. There's a couple of answers that you could give to this. You might think about that in the past 12 months is quite a long time, and you might not remember if that's happened within those past 12 months or not. The other thing is that bullying is quite a subjective term, and some people may count certain acts as bullying and others might not. So I'm going to go with that one. And now we can comment on how we could possibly improve this. We can include a bit of a definition, an example of what that definition could look like. On to question 2, and I'm going to assume you have read this article that's all about savings habits in New Zealand, and we'll go on to part A. Beginning with what the sample frame is for this survey. So the sample frame is sort of like the edges that you put around the people that you could sample from. Now, we were told that they could that they were sampling from the 18 to 64-year-old New Zealanders that have a bank account. Then we're asked to work out a margin of error. Now, 1,000 people were sent the survey to do, but only 500 completed it. So n is equal to 500 on this survey. So the margin of error is going to be plus or minus the square root of 1 over 500, and that comes to, and times it by 100, and we got it in percent, so plus or minus 4.47%. And then what does that mean in the context of the headline statistic? Well, the headline was that a quarter of Kiwis hold less than a month's savings. So we would be able to add on or take away that 4.5% from the 25 to get our confidence interval. And actually, if we look in the detail of paragraph 2, we can see the headline actually rounded that to something they could turn into the word quarter, whereas actually the statistic in the survey was 26%. Okay, so what that means is we can expect the true value in our population of people who hold less than a month's worth of savings to be between 26 minus 4.5, that margin of error, and 26 plus 4.5. So it gives us a confidence interval between 21.5 and 30.5. Then the survey reports that the percentage of females using mobile applications has increased by 10%. From 9 to 19, and the number of females sampled in 2012 was 265 and 240 in 2013. We want to find the margin of error for the difference between these two polls and then see what it tells us. So that difference is 10%. Now the margin of error on the difference, we have two groups that are independent of each other. So that's 1.5 times the average between their two margins of error. Okay, so the first one is 1 over the square root of 265. That was for 2012. And the second one is 1 over the square root of 240 from 2013. Okay, so let's do that on the calculator. Oops, I forgot the square root. 1 divided by the square root of 265 plus 1 divided by the square root of 240. Divide that by 2, times it by 1.5. And then as a percentage, that's going to be plus or minus 9.4%. So let's turn that into a confidence interval on the difference. So 10 minus 9.4 is going to be 0.6%, and 10 plus 9.4, 19.4%. So the conclusion that we can draw is that this doesn't contain 0. It's entirely positive. So it does support the claim that the female use of mobile applications to manage their money has in fact increased. Okay, part D. We want to discuss the statistical reason for why, as part of their sampling method, MasterCard used a mixture of online and paper forms of respondents to complete. And in that answer, we want to describe at least one issue that needs to be considered with sampling method that was used in this survey. So the people they selected, they sent them both a paper and online copy, so that we don't exclude the ones that potentially could miss their chance or be less likely to respond if they were just given one of those. So let's identify what that could look like for each of online and paper. So I've put there about if they only did an online survey, that might exclude perhaps older users. I haven't written that, but maybe those that don't like to use the internet as much, or they live rurally with limited connection to the internet. And then if they conversely only did paper, there may be some that ignore that as junk mail being sent to them, or find it inconvenient to actually fill it out and then find a postbox and mail it back. So yeah, there's a couple of examples. You could probably think of other ones as well. And then we need to finish by describing at least one issue that needs to be considered by having done this by both paper and online. And what that means is they've selected their sample and then sent them both a paper and an online survey. So there's a potential that someone could respond to both of those. You need to make sure that their responses aren't being double counted. Okay, on to question 3. Again, I am assuming that you have read the article, taken in the information, and we will go to the questions. So the previous versions of this only looked at respondents that were in private accommodation. So non-private accommodation would include facilities where people are looked after, such as retirement homes or villages. And that's important in this kind of survey because we would want to be able to know what's happening with older people within New Zealand. Okay, for part B, we want to find the margin of error and the confidence interval for the percentage of adults that were obese. And we were given that the sample size was 13,009 and the reported percentage that were obese were 31%. And we got the 13,009 by adding together the male and female adults because we were looking for just the percentage of adults that were obese. And that 31% came from the very first bullet point in the article. Right now, our margin of error is equal to plus or minus 1 over the square root of n. And we'll times that by 100. We get 0.87, let's call it 88%. So the confidence interval is to do 31 minus that. So 30.12%, and then 31 plus 0.88. Part C, the survey reports that childhood obesity rates have increased. Find the margin of error for the difference between those two surveys. Comment on whether that has actually happened. So in the 2012-13 survey, we had childhood obesity was reported as 11%. There were 2,298 boys and 2,187 girls, making a total of 4,485. Now, in the 2006 to 7, the last bullet point on the child obesity statistics tells us it was at 8%. And then from the table, we've got 2,589 boys and 2,332 girls. So N is 4921. Okay, so the difference is 11 minus 8, which is 3%. The margin of error, on that difference These are two independent groups, so we're doing 1.5 times the average margin of error. So half of the two margins of error added together. So that's 1 over the root of 4485 plus 1 over root 4921. So divide that by 2. We've got the average margin of error, now times it by 1.5 and turn it into a percentage. So that's going to be plus or minus 2.2%. Okay, so the confidence interval now on the difference will be 3 minus 2.2%, so that would be 0.8%, up to 3 plus 2.2, so 5.2%. Now that is entirely positive, so that does suggest an increase. Now, these surveys were done face-to-face with interviewers, and we need to comment on the advantages and disadvantages. And because we have advantages, we're not saying comment on one advantage and one disadvantage. We need to give at least 2 for each. So let's start with the advantages. The first that I've put is that you get a high response rate when you're interviewing with people. People are less likely to opt out or refuse to answer questions when you're dealing with an actual real-life person. Another advantage is that an interviewer can actually build off of the response that's been given. So if somebody needs a little bit more explanation about what a question is meaning, or they've given a response that didn't quite match the question, they can ask for further details or give more clarification. All right, now the disadvantages. First one that I've put is that people may not be completely honest in their responses, especially if it's something that is socially awkward to talk about to another person, or you might feel judged by it. So if they're asking questions about health, diet, how much they drink, or how much they smoke, people would be less likely to answer that honestly when it's done face to face. And the last disadvantage that I will put is that it's costly and time consuming to do it in this way. And that brings us to the end of this practice external assessment. If you found this video helpful, please do interact with it because it helps other people to find that and just drive up the traffic to it. And if you found it useful, then someone else probably would as well. And it just helps me out a little bit with getting this shared around. So appreciate any help that you can give there. And check out my channel for any more help that you might need on level 3 statistics or calculus. And I will see you next time.